A good evening, dear viewer, and thanks for tuning in yet again for this session of the Face Off. It's WBS TV. My name is Baguma Tinkasimire Richard, and tonight I am not a panelist. I am the host. I'm stepping into the shoes or slippers of Peter Chivazo, who is down south. And I have not the usual panel, except one. And that one is on my extreme left, Charles Rwumsha.
The Almighty God is great.
I will introduce the others. I know the viewers should know them reasonably well. Honorable Jessica Erio is the daughter of the East African soil. She is Deputy Secretary General for the East African Community for productive and social sectors. She will tell us if they are unproductive sectors at the East African Community that the other Deputy Secretary Generals. You are welcome, Honorable Jessica.
Thank you very much, Richard, and good evening, viewers.
On my immediate left is Kagwa Luze Andrew. Now, Kagwa Luze Andrew is here for business because he's the Executive Director of the East African Business Council. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Richard. Good evening, viewers.
Now, I'll start with you, Charles, and I'd like you to be brief. These two are talking about the East African Business Council, the East African Community. In your view, do these things exist?
The East African Community, conceptually, it exists as a concept. Historically, it was there, and it collapsed. Then the politicians, for some reason, wanted to rejuvenate it and killed it. I'm not very sure whether the process of burial is complete, but they killed it. Because the core members are Kenya, or were Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. But the two, later on they co-opted other members, that is Burundi and Rwanda. Interestingly enough, Tanzania, who is a core member, is in SADC. And that the foreign policy is quite very different from the core members. Tanzania is a competitor with Kenya in terms of the economy. I think it's the second largest economy, and has a port. Now, but its foreign policy is different, more especially on the issue of Congo. Whereas Rwanda has a different policy, the policy of looking for land, the policy of expansion, both economically, socially, and even militarily, because at one stage it even seized DRC. James Kabarebe was the head of the military at the other end. You could meet him there and greet him in Nyankore.
That is exists.
Yes. So now, as of now,
yeah,
you have a coalition of the willing. If you are talking about in terms of infrastructure design, that you are talking about a railway line from Mombasa up to Kigali, but it's not being constructed by a community, but a coalition of the willing. Actually, they have termed it as the summit, the infrastructure summit, and purposely to isolate Tanzania.
I would like to cut in there. Honorable Jessica Erio.
Yes, Richard.
You are Deputy Secretary General for something that exists conceptually, according to Charles Rwumsha. Tell me your take.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I would like to thank Charles, but I would like to disagree with him because the East African community exists in reality. It's not conceptually. It is true that there was a community, 1967 to 1977, it collapsed, but because it was a good thing, there were good aspects of the community, it was revived, and the treaty was written in 1999, and it came into force in the year 2000. It is in place. And a number of provisions of the treaty have been implemented. It's an ongoing process. It's not a one-day event that there is an East African community and everything is perfect. There are a lot of protocols which are annexes to the treaty that have also been agreed upon and signed. We have the Customs Union Protocol, the Monetary Union, the Common Market Protocol, and recently the Monetary Union Protocol. And East African Community is based on 4 pillars. The Customs Union, the Common Market, Monetary Union, and Political Federation. So these are supposed to be achieved in stages, one after another, but not to first completely achieve one before you move to another, but to start this and see how it progresses, and then start the other one, and then they all move together. So we anticipate to have a political federation eventually. I would like to disagree with Charles and say that, yes, first of all, it is true that Tanzania belongs to the SADC, but also Tanzania does not belong to COMESA, while Uganda, Kenya, and Rwanda belong to COMESA. Now, we also have a tripartite arrangement with SADC and COMESA. So under this tripartite arrangement, there is a convergence also on aspects of economic development, on trade, on industrialization. So there are these agreements. And also in terms of the coalition of the willings, so-called, that is referring to, I don't think there is something like coalition of the willing. I don't know who developed this term. But I would like to say that what the 3 countries of Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda have taken upon themselves to fast-track implementation are infrastructure projects on the northern corridor. These infrastructure projects include road transport, roads, railways, oil pipelines, and other major infrastructure. These infrastructure were all agreed upon at the East African Community level. And it's a question of implementation. And I'm happy that the central corridor, which is from Dar es Salaam to Kigali and to Bujumbura, have also started. Actually, as these 3 countries started discussing, having these summits on how they can move forward these projects, Tanzania and Burundi also started those discussions and invited Rwanda as well. So there are also other meetings between Tanzania, Rwanda, and Burundi on the central corridor. Now, on the issue of saying that, Charles, what did you say? That this.
Yeah, because he had a lot of things, but his gist is that
you see,
this exists. But I want to come to the businessman, because you see, I have faith in business people. And I can tell
more
you...
than pastors.
Yes, pastors are business people. They do social enterprises, and they are very good at it.
And economic enterprise as well.
Yeah, social enterprises are economic. They are political as well. Yeah. But to you, Mr. Executive Director for the Business Council, now, I hear that the architecture of the East African community is private sector-led.
I do agree that the community does exist, but the issue, where are we? Is that the desired level?
At concept level, absolutely.
There are some aspects where we have achieved. For example, we have eliminated internal duties.
What does that mean?
For example, a good moving from Kenya to Uganda, there is no import duty.
Blue band coming from Kenya to Uganda?
Yes.
There's no
import duty.
And that helps.
It helps the local man, because in areas where there is scarcity, you have abundance. Abundance means that the price will go down. Your welfare will improve as a local man. So the community provides their benefits to the local man. We have movement of people. You can move from Uganda to Kenya without a visa.
How about Tanzania?
You can move to Uganda to Tanzania without a visa.
But Tanzania is chasing Rwandese.
The issue of chasing...
you will not respond to all Romshana's questions. I would like you, you won't finish.
I
would like to hear those things.
We have a common external tariff.
Exactly. What does that mean?
Which means that all the 5 countries, whenever you are importing any good from outside the region, you apply a uniform duty.
Yeah, the question is, so what? I mean, to a viewer, to another person, what does that mean?
Which means that if Kenya was importing at 10% and Uganda is imposing 30%, which means that there are instances of even smuggling, because the nearby country like Kenya is importing at 10%, which means if I smuggle this product into Uganda, I can outcompete the Ugandan trader or manufacturer. But if all of us are applying the common external tariff, which means the competition is at that level. Yes, we haven't reached that level of applying the common external tariff in a very systematic way, but at least this is a progress. Yeah.
Okay, I listened to the. I am participating in the forum, the Secretary General's forum in Entebbe, and I happened to be there today, and I listened to. Is he your boss?
Yes.
That's your boss?
Yes.
The chair of this.
Yes.
And he had a list of undone things. For me, it almost sounded like a wish list. Here you are, you seem to contradict him.
No. What I'm saying that we are moving as a community. We have not attained the level which we desire, but at least there's progress. And that's the reason why the Business Council is there, to ensure that we push on the partner states. Let us have the commitment. If we agree on something, let us be able to implement. So the Business Council is there to ensure that we track progress. Whatever you agree on, we are able to remind you that, yes, you agree to free movement of labor. But we are still having countries which are charging $2,000 a work permit. Free means free.
And I was going to ask that, but let me first take you on this question of commitment that you have just talked about, and I will come later, a little later, to Charles, about the common market. But first to you, Honorable Jessica Rio, Deputy Secretary General of the East African Community. I mean, I think you have very little grounds to contradict me when I say that we as governments, we are paying lip service to the East African community. And I can tell you why. If you are saying you are committed to an institution, your own institution, and you can only pay less than 30% or just about 30% of its budget, and it's not that the governments don't have that money. So this is lip service. Honorable Jessica, I know you have to speak nicely about these things, but this is lip service.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's indeed very true. You are very right that we are committed to this East African community integration. And therefore, we must be able to fund our integration process. We must be able to fund our integration programs and projects. There are quite many of them, and very well intentioned, because we sit down, we discuss, we agree with all stakeholders on what we need to do. But it's really very unfortunate. We feel frustrated ourselves at the East African Community Secretariat. At the moment, anyway, we have made proposals for us to identify different alternatives of raising funds, because currently the partner states are contributing equal amount to our coffers. This comes to 30% or slightly less. 70% or more of our budget comes from development partners. And I think it is not sustainable at all. We're already beginning to see that there are certain projects that we have agreed with development partners, we are implementing, and then they are saying we are changing our funding strategies. One of them is, for example, the USAID. They say now they have a new funding strategy. And in this new funding strategy, they have areas of interest, and it will not cover everything that we've been doing before. But they are reviewing, so they've not given us the details. Very soon we'll now have to sit to agree again with them, and yet some of the programs or areas that they have been supporting us in are still ongoing. So we will remain in a dilemma on how we are going to move forward this integration agenda. And so we are discussing. The Council of Ministers are discussing. The ministers have a lot of goodwill. But you see, every partner state has priorities. And their budgets can never be enough for all the priorities. And so, you know very well, ministries of finance will have to make sure that they cut their coat according to the cloth that they have. The ESC needs to have a slight increment. But I'm happy to say that over the years, we've had at least more than 10% increment contributions from partner states. It's not that 70% has remained like that forever. This year, we actually had a 10% increment from partner states, almost about 20% decrease from development partners. So we can see from development partners there is a decrease. And in doing so, we've also been able to reorganize our own internal budget so that we try to become more efficient. We try to reduce some of the activities. We're actually putting in place infrastructure for online meetings so that we do not spend so much money for tickets and things like that, but only for very important meetings that will need people seated together. We are trying to equip our boardrooms in the ministries of ESC affairs, in the ESC, in the institutions, so that we can have face-to-face meetings online. And we also beginning to streamline our meetings on the internet so that people out there can also be able to participate in our meetings. So we are devising a number of strategies to see how best we can use the little money that is given to us. It is definitely not enough. We call upon partner states to really support the ESC.
Yes, now, Charles.
You have heard them, they are pleading.
Saba government etuyambe. It's a common statement here. Everyone who goes on television says to Saba government etuyambe. The Honorable Erio is also Saba government etuyambe.
She's holding a rosary pleading.
Now, Charles, I heard at the meeting today that the people from the Secretariat and the MPs, the RMPs and others went to Entebbe to try and bring the East African community to the people. And then they talked about the common market. And some say, where is this market, this common market? So that we also go. And the fisher communities were saying, why are you delaying us? Where is this community? We don't see it. But you have been a politician. You still are, by the way, in my perspective. But you've been in the Constituent Assembly, you've been in government. Do you see commitment amongst the East African leaders to the community?
You see, I was trying to study how East African leaders, the way you see them, could easily agree. And what I immediately saw was that the community was not necessarily about markets, but how quickly they would move the capital they have rooted from their own countries. You know, it's not safe to invest the money you have stolen from Uganda on Katosi Road in Uganda, but it can be safely invested in Tanzania. So long as that flexibility is there, that security of that money is there, because most of these fellows who are rooting money here, they are investing it in Kenya, for instance, and the Kenyans can also do it the other way around. That's why that cooperation was easily constructed. Two, the other protocols they made were about security. If you are fighting Uganda and you run to Kenya, how can they bring you quickly? What they call fighting terrorism. But when it comes to real market, because you see, you need to first be selfish. If you are promoting industrialization in Uganda, what product do you want to sell in this market? If you check what is there for this market is for India, it is for China. These presidents, these chiefs are only building markets for India, for China. Actually, it's surprising that you are pleading to USA. And no wonder that you are not getting money, they are changing their mechanisms of funding you. Because you are not building for your own capacity. Look at, like, for instance, mills, the steel industry here. We had our own local capacity in Sembule steel mills. It has collapsed. It's now rats are resident in that industry. And see who has been promoted. I don't need to talk about his race. They shouldn't choose me. I choose me of that. So look at our education system here. Who are those who are holding our private education? But you can analyze how well dressed she is. Yeah, I'm interested in the laboratory results. how is the chemistry of her blood, how is the chemistry of her nervous system, excretion system, and digestion system. To me, that's because those are the ones that make life. This community was there before it collapsed. It collapsed in the foreign party, in the foreign policy of Tanzania. Tanzania occupied us. It overthrew a government here and colonized us for some time. Tanzania is at it again, whether it was provoked or not, but it's at it. There was the what you call the African solution against the so-called negative forces in Congo. You remember? And Uganda and Rwanda were saying M23 was not a negative force. They were defining FDLR as a negative force. What did Tanzania do? It led SADC and only beat M23 and wiped it out, plus its backers. They ran locally within 5 days. Now look at what happened in South Sudan when the Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya attempted to isolate the North Sudan, the Sudan, on the pipeline to Lamu. Because you know the economy of the Sudan, the original, is dependent on that oil. But they wanted to divert it. What happened? You now have a civil war in South Sudan. It can't be resolved by IGAD and by some of these states. Now they are attempting at isolating Tanzania again. And its policy stance is very clear. Rwanda must negotiate with FDLR. Rwanda is saying Zakubita. You may interpret it very well. So where is it now? They have chased Rwandese who have been 50 years in Tanzania. And they're talking about political integration, that Rwandese can now go back and they become citizens of the East African community and stay there. It can't be. So
on that point, I would like us to go for a commercial.
So now look at the speaker. When the speaker of Uganda, when she attempted at campaigning for the speaker of the East African community, what was the president's statement? He said, "No, you are bearings." I'm quoting him verbatim. "No, you are bearings. You come from a disco and you go in." This is foreign policy. In other words, there are other things that they were looking at from this region. Don't look at the common market. Look at the politics.
And that's
and the moment the politics fail, the community is no more.
That's Charles Rumshana's view, that we look at the politics. And on that political note, we are going for a commercial break. When we come back, we will hear from the Deputy Secretary General. You've heard from Charles Rumshan. Should we ignore everything else and look at the politics? Don't go away.